Hello and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking about commercial property and specifically who are the most active occupiers. Here at Nimbus, we've seen a real surge in companies back on the acquisition trail across all sectors, some old, some certainly new to me, which is tremendously encouraging. There's also a huge amount going on the planning system at the moment with Class E, which is the joining up of the old planning use classes, giving much more flexibility on what you can do with a building. And Class MA coming into force on the 1st of August, allowing much more flexibility on creating mixed-use buildings to drive additional value out of them. Some of our most profitable, lowest risk developments in the past have been these mixed-use developments. And we often cite the Cafe Nero in Farnham, where we took an old empty tapas restaurant and created a Cafe Nero with 2 flats above. And fundamentally, we basically gave Cafe Nero £10,000 as part of their fit out. They put a staircase in and did the fire separation. And what was worth £500,000 was then sold for 1.5 million. So quite a significant uplift from a £10,000 investment. And as our property entrepreneurs, we always want well-known trophy occupiers in our portfolios. But like with most requirements, they've only got a specific town or location. So once they've occupied that specific town or location, it's gone. So you need to act early and you need to plan ahead, because once it's chalked off their list, it's over, and you really want to be the one that's doing the deal with them. So to help me today, I've invited on our guest speaker, Adam Crooks from the requirements list. Hopefully he's there.
Yeah.
Hi, Adam, who we've known for many years. Originally a commercial agent at Rapley's, acting both on the acquisitions and the disposal side, most notably the likes of Majestic Wines. He then went on to build the requirements list, which pulls together active requirements and also who to contact about them. So, hi, Adam, are you there? Your camera's not working at the moment.
I am here. How are we doing?
Right.
How are we doing, Simon? You okay?
Okay?
Yes, I'm here.
Good, brilliant. Perfect. And of course, my colleague Joe, who wakes up every morning with a spring in his step, wanting to help people achieve their property investment and development goals. Hi, Joe, how are you doing?
Yes, very good, very excited. Saw some familiar names here as well. So, yeah, excited to go through it all.
Super exciting. So, Adam, a quick question to you, which we like to ask is, so why do you do what you do and why do you love doing it?
Oh, you never gave me the heads up about this question, Simon.
I can drop it on you, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I think I just, obviously I'm doing the requirement list at the moment. I just kind of, I'm enjoying the technology side of things, kind of connecting the two parties, whether it be occupiers that are looking for space with landlords, agents, developers, investors that have the space. So it's great when you hear kind of success stories of, yeah, I used the requirement list for a certain search and I managed to link up with X, Y occupier. So that's great. Yeah, I think that's kind of is that a good answer?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, I do remember the good old days of like taking copies of requirements out of the Estates Gazette or Property Week, or even downloading from the website, putting into a lever arch file like we have behind us, and thinking that was kind of revolutionary and whose requirements and what,
yeah,
who to contact. And then we then stuck it on a spreadsheet, and we thought we were the bee's knees. And of course, you know, when you built what you did, which was obviously keep those requirements up to date and keep them live and who to contact, it's made an enormous difference.
Yeah, you're right. It's yeah, back in my Rapley's days, or whether there's any agents or if there's any individuals that are working with property at the moment, back in the day it was you get sent out a requirement flyer.
Share your screen and give us a bit of a sorry.
Yeah, is it my have I got a lag on my
no, a bit of a lag on mine, I think. It says mine.
Yes, I think that's right, Simon, actually.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Well, I'll share my screen and we can, what's best, Joe? Shall I share my screen and then if you want to run through?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you share yours and then we can cut across. That's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Well, with number 3, I think, on the list.
Let's have a look. Let me just jump on here 1 second. So share screen. Present. Okay, thumbs up. Can you see my screen, Simon, Joe?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So, yeah, thank you again, Simon, Joe, for inviting me on. So I think we had a chat last week in terms of what we wanted to go through and how we could kind of help some of the listeners in terms of giving them a bit of an overview as to what's going on in the market at the moment, who's active, who's searching for new sites, and what those kind of requirements are. So what we've done, we've just looked at 3 specific sectors in terms of active sectors and who are kind of actively seeking sites at the moment, and we've kind of broken those down. And what we'll aim to do is we'll go through each sector. I'll kind of give a bit of an overview as to that sector, and then we'll jump over to Joe, who will kind of give you a bit of a steer as to how you could potentially find those sites using Nimbus Maps. So hopefully it all goes to plan. Simon, Joe, just shout if there's any questions in the meantime, or any technical issues. Just
sure. And at the end, we're going to have a live Q&A at the end for the audience, so we'll bring them in at that stage, and which is fine.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so as Simon mentioned, the requirement list is a database of commercial property requirements. We speak to agents, occupiers as well directly, just to see where they're looking at the moment. Are they still active? Where they're looking for, whether that be specific target locations across the UK, and also their broad requirements in terms of size, planning use class, and other specs, etc. So yeah, top 3 requirements, how to find them off market. So firstly, coming in, okay, I've just pressed next. Here we go, drive-throughs. So first sector, as we all know, certainly in the last year or so, or pre-COVID, drive-throughs were a really kind of active sector. And I guess COVID's really kind of accelerated that. There are over 1,500 drive-through sites in the UK. Just a bit of an overview in terms of what some of the people in the industry are saying. I mean, Starbucks have confirmed that 80% of their new sites will include a drive-through lane. The likes of Greggs have recently been looking to secure drive-through opportunities as well. So who's in the market? So we've got our well-established players in the UK market, ranging from the kind of the household names of McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, and then your Costas and your Starbucks, which is your coffee drive-throughs. We have others that are kind of not necessarily new entrants, or some are new entrants, whether it be from overseas, are looking to kind of increase their drive-through representation across the UK. So we've got GDK, the likes of Tim Hortons that have come over from the Canada and the US, Five Guys, which have been in the market for certainly it feels like sort of 3 or 4 years now, but they've kind of confirmed they're now looking for drive-through opportunities. Taco Bell, they've had a small presence in the UK as well, albeit that being kind of franchisee led, but there's been a real push from Taco Bell, and certainly the last year or so, that we're noticing from retained agents to kind of shout about their requirements and really grow that business. We're also seeing other US entrants like Wendy's, Popeyes, and multiple other names that are looking to kind of get a foothold in the UK market. I've added Greggs in there as well. Typically, we'll always associate Greggs with a high street unit. They then kind of jumped onto the retail parks, and now we're seeing them want drive-through opportunities, whether it be a drive-through lane as well. So a bit of an overview.
Adam, could you just explain to me Tim Hortons?
Tim Hortons requirement. Yeah, so
this is who are Tim Hortons? Just for my own benefit, sorry.
Yeah, so Tim Hortons are initially were founded over in Canada, have a huge presence over in the US or North America, coffee operator. So they came over to the UK, feels like maybe north of 2 years ago, and whether it's franchisee led, they managed to get a bit of a foothold in Scotland. So as you know, a lot of these kind of franchisees will find a site and then will grow locations around that kind of main hub, wherever they initially have a presence. So I think they're probably north of 10 sites, perhaps. I'll have to double check, but they're typically a coffee operator similar to the likes of a Costa Coffee or a Starbucks. They went kind of quiet maybe the last 2 years or so, but it feels like they're in the news recently for opening new sites, and that's not certainly at the scale that Costa and Starbucks are doing. It's still kind of single digits, but it's worth noting that they're in the market and have a similar requirement to the likes of Costa and Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah, so our kind of data shows that over 60 new drive-through openings since summer 2020. There's also tons of plan applications being submitted that will include a drive-through that ranges from your typical service station sites to retail park locations, whether it be converting an existing a single unit to a kind of a drive-through unit. Also roadside sites, which I'm sure Joe will touch upon next. So a whole kind of range of applications that are being submitted for drive-through operators. So typical size requirements range from 0.3 to 0.5, and that's dependent on who the operator is. And then the unit size, the size of the property that will sit on that site ranges from just north of 1,000 square feet up to 2,200 square feet, and that's depending on the format. So it might be a smaller Costa Coffee, or it might be a larger McDonald's drive-through unit taking up some of the larger space. So as I touched upon, these requirements range from new build, so kind of a brownfield site, building from the ground up, to conversion. So I'm sure we've all seen them. So converting, say, an old Blockbuster, you know, so maybe some empty stores that are empty single units that are on retail parks. You might see this converted into a drive-through unit instead of knocking it down and starting again, or maybe a pub conversion. We've seen like a McDonald's pub conversions as well. So I've touched upon rents paid here. As we've mentioned, and why it's in this presentation, it's a really active sector. There's lots of operators gunning for the same sites. Rents typically range from £25 per square foot up to 50, and obviously that's dependent on location, so and where that kind of pitch is. I've made a note here of using Nimbus as well to look at some retail comps. So if you had a site that had potential for a drive-through operator, and you were keen to kind of get a bit of a steer as to what a operator may pay, well, you could use the likes of Nimbus to check out a nearby McDonald's or a Costa or a Starbucks and download their lease, for example, just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour as to what you could kind of command for in terms of rent. I think that's kind of the overview in terms of drive-through. I've added a quick slide here in terms of just keep an eye on the locals as well. Obviously, we'll always touch on those that are in the press, the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, the KFCs, the household names. But kind of we're just seeing a bit of an increase in locals that are obviously keen to get into the drive-through space as well. So I've touched on here Wright's Pies, who I'm not familiar with. They're up in Stoke. They submitted an application last year for a drive-through unit. Bewitched Coffee, they recently opened, I think it was last week, and they claim to be that they advertise themselves as the first independent drive-through. And we had a requirement added a couple of months ago from At Pizza that are looking to secure kind of shipping container drive-through units, whether that be on retail parks or roadside locations. So I think it's just worth mentioning that whilst we all know our household names, if you do have a relationship with a local operator and you're in conversation with them, and I'm sure, like most operators, that they'd love a drive-through site. So maybe the local guys might be a bit more flexible in terms of the size they may take. They might not need as great of access as a Starbucks or a Costa. So yeah, I've just touched on it here. Just keep an eye on the locals as well if you've got a relationship.
They may pay slightly more on the rent as well, possibly just to sort of, eke up the fact their yield isn't as strong as well. So there's always that option as well, to sort of get your capital values there to still make it stack up financially. Yeah, certainly, and especially when you're looking at a shipping container requirements as well. Obviously they have there's a less capital value out. There's less of a kind of if you're able to fulfill a requirement through a potential smaller roadside site that a Costa or a Starbucks might not take, and you can fulfill it at Pizza through a shipping container, then that might open up some, more opportunity potentially. So it's worth bearing in mind. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a steer as to the drive-through sector. Shall I kind of just cancel share screen and jump over to you, Joe, in terms of
yeah, brilliant.
Fab. So what I'll do, stop share screen.
There you go, and then I'll share mine. Perfect. I was going to say, Adam, I'm suddenly very hungry after watching all of your slides.
Yeah, you're always hungry, Joe.
Yeah, very true. So yes, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a little bit of a kind of a whistle stop tour, very, very quick, just in terms of kind of looking at each individual part that Adam goes through, those 3 parts today. So in terms of Nimbus, if you're not familiar with Nimbus, Adam's going to sort of tell you kind of the requirements and what they're looking for. Nimbus is a tool where you can kind of go, right, fantastic, put those requirements in there and go and find me those sites. So we marry together incredibly well as well. In terms of drive-throughs, there's actually a couple of ways that we could do that. So there's a functionality on the left in the filters where we can take Adam's requirements that he mentions and we can go and find those sites. But actually for drive-throughs as well, there is another way that I'll start with as well. So first and foremost, the way that I would like to show you is doing company searches. So we can go and see kind of where these drive-through exist already. Your places like McDonald's, KFCs, things like that. Where do they actually already exist in the country as well? So obviously that's going to give you a very good leading indicator that any sites around there are obviously going to be of interest as well. So because I'm such a big fan of McDonald's, I know that they operate under McDonald's Restaurant Limited. And then we can go and say to Nimbus, go and plot all of their sites on the map. Nimbus goes off and tells us, yeah, McDonald's are pretty busy across the country. So we can start to zoom in on these sort of sites here. If we kind of, I don't know, head for Leicester-ish kind of way, we can see that they've got a freehold kind of on the outskirts there of Leicester there as well. So if we zoom in, this is interesting for several reasons. First and foremost, it's not very densely populated here at the moment for this McDonald's. So we can start to maybe explore these kind of sites around here as well. Maybe if we could search there as well, maybe extend our filters out a little bit. So we can start to have a look around kind of this side of area. I think I'm right in saying, Adam, these kind of companies love roundabouts. They love kind of traffic flow data, things like this, but you've obviously got a really good indicator because McDonald's already exist. So we can kind of look around areas like this, and we might be looking at something like this one here. Suddenly, Nimbus is going to give us that information in terms of who owns it, how long have they owned it for, and in terms of things like rent and other data, we can go across the road and look at McDonald's and kind of see the details and what kind of rents that they're paying as well. So I'm going to cover probably the information panel a little bit more because I get very, very excited about this stuff and you'll never shut me up. So it's kind of, but I'll go through that in more detail. But things like this, you've got the owner. The things you're going to really want to know about are things like how big is the actual site, and then obviously any planning history in the area as well. We do show you that actually in this information panel. So if Land of North side of Tamworth Road had some planning, we would show that. There is another way I'm going to show you when we get into the other parts and kind of things like overlays and things, which I think would be very, very valuable there as well. So it's a really, really good way, first and foremost, of finding those kind of sites. Where do McDonald's exist? And kind of those areas like this that are potentially, could be great sites as well. It's very, very quick, very, very easy to do. The other ways that we can do that is go into filters. I'm going to explore this a little bit in 2 and 3, but essentially we can go in here and put our requirements in, but it's probably better I show you that with delivery and things like that there as well, because you can really see harness the power. But we can squeeze down the sizes. We can kind of say what we're looking for, which we're looking for kind of 0.3 up to that kind of 0.5-ish, and we can go and find those. And then the only other thing that I'd mention, and Adam, you can tell me as well, is that Nimbus Maps holds traffic flow data. So traffic flow, very important to these kind of roadside retail. They kind of want, I'm going to say 20,000 upwards, Adam. Is that probably about right?
Yeah, like I mean, a lot of them stay kind of north of 15. So yeah, pretty much the same. Well,
yeah, so Nimbus actually provides that kind of data. So you wouldn't really need it for somewhere like here, because obviously, McDonald's already exists, but you can kind of see if we come right out, they're obviously on here because they're coming off a road with 65,000 there as well. They will take into consideration if there's a crossing, if you're able to cross the road, they'll probably split that out in terms of what they're getting on that side of the road. But there's that element of it as well. So multiple ways to kind of find sites. That's probably my favorite in terms of using the company search as well. But we're going to dive into the filters when Adam takes us through kind of step 2 there as well.
I think, Joe, what's also worth noting as well, if you jump back onto that site that you'd highlighted, what's useful about the kind of the toolbar to the left is, let's say, for example, that you felt this was suitable for a Costa Coffee, and you got in touch with Costa Coffee, and you were drafting your email. Hi, acquisition manager, FYI, would you consider this site in Midlands? And then you can use a toolbar to the left. You can kind of just copy and paste all that data across. So the site area is 4.1 acres. Traffic flow data is XYZ that you've taken from your or your tool or the tools on the left, and kind of give them a bit of steering to the occupiers that are nearby. So yeah, you can definitely make the most of the filters on the left to kind of include that within your kind of introductory email or the way of getting in touch with an operator.
Absolutely. Yeah, because obviously you're going to be, it's like you say, the constraints are going to be a big thing as part of this as well. We've got visual representation of these, but obviously you're going to want to know what you're getting involved with, not in a flood zone, not in green belt, anything like that.
Yeah.
That's key as well.
And it's, I guess, depending on the relationship you have with the operator, you can you send that site directly to them through like a URL or a hyperlink, and include.
Yeah, so you could share this title, and basically that just gives you that link. So you could say, yeah, go and check it out, take you straight through to Nimbus, and you can go and check out, pulls this panel out from the left. Absolutely, you could do that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
and they can see that on the free version if they're not signed up to the paid for version as well, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. They'll see so yeah, they've got two versions really. They'll see kind of the outline, things like that, and they'll be able to actually see a visual representation of it, even in a free platform. So absolutely. Cool. Perfect. So Adam, shall I throw back to you now? Shall I stop sharing and if you go into your next part? Is that the best thing to do?
Yeah, please do. That felt pretty. Yeah, let's do that again. So share screen. Cool. Can you see my screen?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, next sector that seems really active at the moment, and conversations that we're having with agents and operators directly, is the kind of food to go delivery sector. Let's go next. Okay, bear with me. Next. So who's in the market? We're having conversations with kind of the household names of the Pizza Hut, the Domino's, Papa John's, and Subway, who are all kind of well established in the UK market. They're actively promoting their property requirements at the moment. Certainly, Pizza Hut went quiet last year and the year before last, and there's kind of been a bit of a push in recent months for them to kind of get back in the market, let the market know that they're in the market. And there's also obviously an increase in regional operators that are looking to kind of jump on that increased trend of takeaway, and that be kind of London operators as well as just local and regional. So I guess what I like about some of these requirements, you kind of more the high street requirements, is that typically these operators will kind of show you their target locations. So whereas your drive-through operators like your McDonald's, your Starbucks, your Costa and KFCs, whilst sometimes they might state where they want to be, typically they might not actively promote their target locations. That might be from a defensive point of view or for other reasons. But what you'll typically find with some of these delivery operators, that they will state, we want to be in X, Y, and Z, go out and find us some locations. So, and that kind of, with my kind of agency hat on, that kind of really gives you a kind of focus in terms of, okay, I'm based in Bristol, I'm in the Southwest, I'm out on the road today. I know that Domino's, Pizza Hut want to be in Trowbridge, Melksham, so on and so forth. So I think that really helps when you're looking at this sector, is kind of real focus on where they want to be, because they've stated that we want to be here. So in terms of size, they can go as low as 650 square feet. Typically, when I've been speaking to them, that's kind of the exception. I guess that they'll have to be kind of desperate for that town or city to kind of go that low, and they will kind of go up to 2,500 square feet. They won't kind of dismiss something if it's slightly larger than their kind of average. They will take a slightly larger store. And obviously this is all dependent on the location as well. High street and secondary parades, so that's where they're kind of looking. They need a bit of parking for delivery bikes, and potentially customer parking as well. Very much dependent on location. They might forfeit some customer parking in certain locations as long as they've got a bit of space, whether it be at the front or the back for delivery bikes. And they'll consider kind of freehold and leasehold opportunities. In terms of planning use case, this is A5. So that's kind of a broad overview in terms of the delivery guys, and I've really only just focused on, for the purposes of this presentation, the Papa John's, the Pizza Hut, and the Domino's. And I've just made an extra note here of just keep an eye on the delivery apps. So what we're seeing in the requirement list is certainly the beginning of this year, probably Q3, Q4 of last year, was a real push from some of the kind of the rapid grocery app. So we can deliver groceries to you within 10 to 15 minutes. So while some of these are predominantly London, Southeast based, the likes of Wheezy's are nationwide. They've recently secured a couple of things here in Bristol. So Wheezy will have their app, you'll use their app. I'd like milk, bread, eggs, and then you'll have that delivered within a 10, 15 minute, 20 minute time period. So just another slide, just something extra, just to keep an eye on. Whilst they might be London specific at the moment, all these guys are really gunning for kind of just market share at the moment. They're all really well funded. In terms of size, they're looking for kind of north of 1,000 square feet. Real mixed bag. It might not necessarily be high street. They might look at some industrial stuff. They don't need to have that kind of high street presence. It's purely a case of storing, let's call them groceries, and then a bike kind of going from A to B within a certain kind of catchment or radius. So they might have Wheezy might have something in South Bristol that feeds the I don't know, 5 mile radius of South Bristol. They might want something in East, North, West. So just something extra to keep an eye on. These delivery guys. Deliveroo are slightly different. They have a slightly different model to the other 4 I have listed here. But yeah, something that maybe the audience might not be aware of. So I've included that there. Yeah, so that's delivery. Hopefully, if I stop sharing screen, Joe, maybe you can kind of give us a bit of an idea as to how we could use Nimbus to
exactly. So there we go.
Do you wonder how we survived in the past, not being able to get our groceries in 10 minutes, 15 minutes delivered to us? So I want bread, eggs delivered in 15 minutes. It's like, how did we ever survive in the past?
Yeah, it's frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, very true. So yeah, with Nimbus, so this is kind of where we move off to the other tools that you have at your disposal, in terms of you can use this for your drive-through requirements, or actually any of your requirements really. So your filters in the top left here. So general filters, this section here, this is where you take all of that data that kind of Adam's given you, and you input it into here, and Nimbus goes off and finds the sites that they're looking for essentially, and it displays it on the map, and then we can go into all that good kind of information that we looked at a moment ago. So I can't remember where I am now. I'm in Ashbourne by the looks of it. So essentially we can look off our center pin, choose whether Adam mentioned that they're interested in leases and freeholds. We can choose whether we want to see those leases from certain dates. Obviously, we do want to know about the planning layer. I might show you that separately, actually, but I would have that on if you're going to be very interested in that. Unregistered land I'll probably take off, and then availability I'm going to put on, because that's kind of another avenue that we will discuss as well. Now, when we're looking for things like delivery, obviously, Adam mentioned kind of, yes, existing takeaways, but we'll consider kind of other spaces there as well. But we can tell the system exactly what they're kind of after there. So we can squeeze down to kind of those sizes they're after. Nimbus actually put it in square meters, but we can squeeze that down a little bit there as well. And then in terms of filters, we can actually give them a usage. So we can say, well, actually, I want them all of this size. This is what we're looking for. And then for things like delivery, I'd say, well, it's probably falling into that kind of retail element there as well. Then essentially, once we've put in all that criteria, Nimbus just goes off and it finds sites that kind of meet that criteria on the map. Now you've got kind of 2 options, because I've done kind of 2 things here. So what we can firstly do is start to go off and investigate those. So as Adam mentioned, kind of have a look through in terms of these sites, see if they do kind of meet any of those requirements that we're looking for. Chances are they will, simply because we've told it, the system, that's what we're kind of looking for. So you can scroll through. If we want any of that kind of good information, like sort of lease information, we can get that fresh from Nimbus. We can go down and kind of see those uses that we mentioned. What kind of rents are they paying at the moment as well? You can see all of that there as well. Obviously, any constraints that we mentioned as well. So we are dealing with a listed building, the one I've clicked on. It is in a flood zone there as well. Now, the other thing that I've done, and is quite frankly very clever with Nimbus, is that I've put our availability overlay on. Now, availability is telling you whether there is a site that's currently on the market. So not only have we got those sites that meet our requirements, but actually with our availability overlay, we can go, actually, these sites may well be, but they are on the market as well in some way, shape or form. So you can kind of click into those A's there and we can see that this one's actually to let. We can link through to Find My Pub and obviously speak to the agent either in regards to that, or would they be interested in kind of selling it there as well. So a lot of kind of finding sites this way is using those filters. Narrow down your searches, start to investigate, start to interact with the map all here. Obviously, if it's on the market, we can then start having a look there. So very, very quickly, we've got two ways that we can go off and find sites incredibly quickly that meet the requirements of these Domino's and kind of pizza chains as well. Now, especially if you kind of know the area and you might say, well, actually, I might want to go into those places where there are takeaways. You can kind of just keep scouring that area. We can move the map to other locations. We can press search here. Nimbus will consistently keep working off your filters, meaning that it's just keep on finding you sites for you there as well. So it's absolutely fantastic for that as well. So yeah, filtration, availability, absolutely fantastic way to kind of find those sites there as well.
Yeah, that's helpful, Joe. I mean, I was doing an exercise probably last year looking for something for Domino's in a location, and I was using Nimbus, and obviously we know the likes of Domino's require A5 use class, so I was using kind of initially the availability filter just to filter down the kind of the low-hanging fruit of what's available, and I guess the whole market knows what's available. So that was kind of, if I was creating a list, it would be, okay, what's available in, if this is Ashbourne or any of those suitable, okay, none of them are. Then I guess the second step was, okay, let's search for properties that have A5 use class, because in that instance, we might not require change of use. So we could just have a property that has A5 use class already. So I was using the filters for that. Yeah. And then even if they weren't empty, Nimbus allows you to see who the tenant is, and then you have the ability to get in touch with that tenant. Also, we know the likes of Domino's or Pizza Hut may pay us may pay a slight premium, or even if they don't pay a premium, their yield is going to be slightly a lot better than or their investment yield is going to be a lot better than a local operator. So in some instances, you could contact, say, if you just kind of zoom down on Ashbourne quickly, Joe. Yeah. Let's look at one of them that's highlighted. What's the name of? So let's go Benny's Pizza and Kebab House. Let's assume that's 2,000 square feet and the layout is perfect for a Domino's, but Benny's have got a lease in there for, we've checked out the lease. They've got an extra 5 years, so that's a bit of a pain, but you know that Domino's on a 15-year lease paying you £10 per square foot with an investment yield of maybe 6%, whatever it might be, you could maybe pay a premium to Benny's for them to exit that lease. So it's just kind of being a bit, you've got all the data at your fingertips there to know that, okay, Benny's have got 5 years left on the lease because I've been able to download the lease off Nimbus. I know what they're paying, and I know how to contact them. So maybe I can get in touch with Benny's, because in Ashbourne, that's really the only opportunity I think that Domino's would suit. So it's just kind of being a bit kind of creative with some of the filters there.
We actually did that in our Lees Lane shopping centre in Kenilworth. We had a fish and chips, it was actually, sorry, Chinese takeaway, and he was paying 15 grand a year rent. Quite a long lease left, actually. It was a 20-year lease with about 10 years unexpired. And we got Domino's and they paid 18.5 grand. And we kind of took the view that because there was 6 units there, including a Tesco's, that the increase in the rents on that overall and the new sort of example of rents on that site was well worth it. And I think at the end, if I remember right, it's a fair few years ago, I think we managed to persuade Domino's to pay us 35 grand, which we passed on to the tenant as part of the sort of a premium that we passed on to the tenant to get possession. So yeah, you might have an occupier, but that yield compression of say, I don't know, 8% to 10% for your kind of local occupier to a Mr. and Mrs. to the Domino's was worth it over a thing. So yeah, you just got to do your numbers and see what you can get with. And again, we didn't have the likes of Nimbus back then because I hadn't built it, but you could go and see what leases, what Domino's paying, was it the right rent, and what you do that appraisal quite quickly, which hence why we built it, I suppose. But yeah, so that example we've done, and it does work, and it makes decent returns. So
yeah, I mean, if the likes of, we're using Domino's as an example, let's say they have a requirement for Ashbourne, at some point in the next 1 to 5 years time, they will find something in Ashbourne. And obviously property has always been about timing, hasn't it? So maybe it might be the perfect timing to contact Benny's kebab shop or whoever it might be in Ashbourne. So I guess it's just a case of just monitoring what's going on in there. And even if it's an A1 unit or Class E, and it requires a change of use, it might still be feasible. So it's just kind of looking at all options. And what I love about
with that one in Kenilworth, sorry to cut across, we did actually get a subject to vacant possession lease off Domino's because they were so desperate to be on the site. So again, we had a deal subject to VP. There was some legal costs clearly that you would waste if you couldn't. So I knew that Domino's were in the bag, and then we could go and have a proper discussion with the tenant and get possession that way. So yeah, whether I still do that now, well, this is about 8 years ago. But yeah, if you get a subject to, you can do your negotiations with some sort of confidence, can't you? I think.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's it's worth noting that when you have an operator that will publish a target town list, everyone that's in the property acquisition space is seeing the same list, and everyone's doing the right move commercial, what's available in Ashbourne. Everyone's doing that. So I guess if you really want to kind of secure something potentially off market, you need to be a bit more creative, and that's when you need the likes of Nimbus to be a bit more clever about it, because you can't just kind of rely on using maybe EGI Property Link or a right move commercial and just seeing what comes on the market, because everyone's doing that. I guess
the horse is bolted by then, I think, hasn't it, by and large? So.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, so that gives a bit of an overview in terms of what the delivery guys are looking for. So thank you for that, Joe.
That's fine. I will go for our third transition back.
Yeah, great. Let me reduce that a second. Bear with me. Do we want to answer any questions that have come in while I just
I think this is the sort of most active one that you're seeing at the moment, is the most active requirement at the moment, Adam, is that right?
Yeah, let me just jump back on. Okay. Yep, find it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So we've got food retail here, and I guess we could probably spend an hour just on this sector talking about the individual operators, their specific requirements. So, but obviously, given the time constraints for this presentation, we want to try and keep it within time limits. So we've got food retail here, and obviously food retail is extremely broad, and it covers supermarkets and convenience. So typically your supermarket will be the likes of your Asda, your Tesco, the big box stuff that we north of 20,000 square feet, or even in some instances 100,000 square feet. I've added food retail. I'll jump to the next page. Just click next. Yeah, so what I've done, I've split food retail into supermarkets and convenience. So supermarket sector, certainly when I was at Rapley's, albeit 5+ years, six years ago, it felt like every operator ranging from the Morrisons, Sainsbury's, Asda, Tesco's were just desperate for sites. And you probably find it, Simon. And these were the big box sites of 50,000 square feet up to 100,000 square feet, Tesco extras, they called them, or whatever it might be. That the appetite for growth from those guys is really dropped, and they've been kind of looking to manage their estates and reduce their footprint. But in terms of active operators in the supermarket sector, it's predominantly been Aldi, Lidl in the last year, or the last 12 months anyway. Aldi, Lidl, and Iceland. Lidl and Aldi both opened over 50 new stores during 2020. Whether they would have done more if it wasn't for COVID, kind of putting a halt to some construction, kind of in certain parts of the year, perhaps. I've got Iceland here. It was Iceland and Food Warehouse, their Food Warehouse brand. You've probably come across the Food Warehouse brand, guys.
Personally, no. Sorry.
So they opened, or as a whole, Iceland and Food Warehouse opened 23 new stores. I say Food Warehouse. Food Warehouse is Iceland. It's just kind of one of their brands. So in terms of requirement for active supermarkets, when I say supermarket, it is the larger format. We'll go on to convenience next. So in terms of sites, if you're looking at a site for the likes of an Aldi Lidl, that typically ranges from 1 acre to 1.5. Aldi and Lidl may look at larger sites if they feel that they can maybe have a bit of a mixed use scheme. So they might take a 3 acre site knowing that they'll sit on half of it and they'll put in a Home Bargains or a B&M or another complementary retailer. So they will look at larger stuff if it's a kind of a competitive situation, but I guess ideally they state they're looking for 1 to 1.5 acres for their standalone units. Unit size range from 10,000 up to 26.5. They take slightly less in London, and they will take even high street stuff in London, but in the main it's kind of edge of town, roadside, sites that have easy access. This kind of ideal for them. In terms of the Food Warehouse requirement, what we're seeing, that's typically they're taking retail park units. So typical retail park, they might have a vacant unit, whether it be mother care that have gone. Food Warehouse will kind of get consent to sell food and then trade from a retail park. We're not seeing, or I'm not seeing, a Food Warehouse just take a kind of a single site. It's typically been a lot of retail park stuff, and the likes of Iceland, they'll take secondary parades, etc. So we can kind of get onto that. So yeah, they'll do new builds, and they'll also do conversions. This is Aldi and Lidl. So I've got here who's in the market. I've touched on Aldi and Lidl and the Iceland and their brand Food Warehouse. What we've seen at the beginning of the year is M&S, Simply Food, come out and for the first time in 5 or 6 years actively shout about their requirements in terms of where they want to be. So they've published a target town list for locations across the UK. So that kind of that's not something I've seen. M&S have always been quite quiet, and they've kind of kept where they want to be, kind of behind closed doors, and they've been really selective in terms of their growth. But yeah, they've got their requirement flower out now, and that'll hopefully give the market a bit of a focus in terms of where they could maybe secure a site for M&S. And M&S's requirement is very similar to the Lidls and Aldis in terms of 10,000 square feet up to 20. So jumping on to convenience stores, it felt like what we were seeing at requirement list was that Co-op, certainly in the last 2, 3, 4 years, were kind of the main player that were kind of shouting about the requirements and actually securing sites, whilst Sainsbury's and Sainsbury's Local and Tesco Express were still opening new stores. It felt like Co-op, but I don't know if you felt the same, Simon, but Co-op are really the main drivers of convenience growth in the UK. I don't know if they managed to hit their target of 100 last year, but they're probably maybe close to it.
I think the beauty was they're quite flexible, aren't they, in terms of the thresholds of what they can do in takings per week. I think, you've got historically the Sainsbury's wanted like 45 grand a week, a week takings to be able to get to their model to work, whereas Co-op could go lower, so it would open up a lot more opportunities to do deals, I think, with those. Then you've got the national Co-op, haven't you, in what we call the national Co-op in Manchester, and then you've got the regional ones as well. So there's quite a diverse network of Co-ops, whereas you've got one Sainsbury's, one Tesco's, and I think it's just the flexibility they've got to be able to take a broader range of sites, which made them very acquisitive, wasn't it? To hit that sort of 100 a year, wasn't it? It's their aim, isn't it? 100, 110. So
yeah, certainly. And yeah, you touched on a good point now of obviously you have the main co-op group, and then you have your regional co-ops, whether it be Southern Co-op, Mid Counties Co-op, Radstock Co-op, so on and so forth. So, but having said that about co-op being kind of the main, or from a personal point of view, being the main driver in the last 2 or 3 years, what we're seeing certainly at the beginning of this year is the likes of Sainsbury's Local and Tesco and One Stop come out and really push their requirements. So really kind of letting the market know that don't forget about us. We're now looking for sites. The likes of Sainsbury's Local are predominantly kind of acquisition managers that you'll get in touch with, whereas Tesco Express will have retained agents across the UK, whether it be Southwest London or certain parts of London, and so on and so forth. So it'll be a mixture of co-op will be typically you'll be contacting a acquisition manager that works directly for co-op, whereas the likes of Sainsbury's Local and Tesco Express will have kind of retained agents in certain patches across the UK. I've added Amazon Fresh. Obviously they've opened a couple of things in London, contactless stores in London. They were kind of in stealth mode for a while, but what I was seeing that they were kind of gradually recruiting a lot more people in the property space. And I don't know if you've got Amazon signed up to your platform, Simon, but yeah, it feels like they've had a real big push.
You know something more about that than I do, but yeah, on the QT maybe.
Yeah, it just feels like there's been a real push for new kind of property recruits, certainly the last, what are we now, June, the last quarter or so. So yeah, it's kind of it was a kind of the worst kept secret about what they're up to in terms of Amazon Fresh, and it'd be interesting to see where else they crop up and whether they've got stuff in legals on a regional basis. I don't personally know, but we'll see. So I've added the main players in terms of co-op, Sainsbury's, Tesco. We're not really seeing a lot being done by Morrison's at present from a convenience format, maybe a couple of petrol filling station stores, but I've also added here some of the secondary convenience operators, the likes of Spar, One Stop, the likes of Heron Foods as well. Just worth bearing in mind if a location's slightly smaller where a co-op might not take it, or a Sainsbury's maybe it hasn't got parking, you might get the likes of a One Stop, or maybe the demographics are different. It might be maybe a lesser demographic location that you're looking at that might be suitable for a Spar or a One Stop. What's the next one? Yeah, I've touched on this. So in terms of unit size, ranging from 2,000 square feet up to 5,000 square feet, they'll take new builds and conversions. The likes of co-ops will also look at existing businesses as a going concern. High street, roadside, transport hubs, new resi schemes. So if you've got a new resi application that's been submitted for 1,000 new homes, that might include a neighborhood centre. There might be might be suitable for a convenience store, takeaway, etc. Yes, that's a bit of a very quick overview in terms of food retail. We could spend a lot more time on this, but I didn't want to kind of push my luck. So
I'll just there's a question from Amit saying, where do I find these requirements, which I think leads quite nicely into obviously what you've created as the requirements list. So you've kind of highlighted about 3 requirements, possibly 2 subsectors of food retail, but obviously your requirements go into sort of 35 different use classes and categories and stuff like that. So this is only 3, but yeah, we'll put the link on Amit in a minute in terms of where you can find more details about how to find Adams, but this is exactly what you're doing. Keep it live and keep live what those requirements are. So
yeah, good question. Yeah, that's the requirement list role, is to speak to agents, speak to occupiers, see who's active, and just keep those property requirements up to date and have that in a nice database format.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Shall I jump in? I'm conscious of time, so we can combine kind of the supermarket and convenience. That's absolutely fine. So let me show you how we would do that in Nimbus. So to take some of the data that Adam's given us again. So again, we're kind of hitting kind of the filters section here at the top again. Again, it's kind of going through all of this detail here. I would have things like the planning layer on, which I'm going to show you that as well. And then in terms of availability, definitely for convenience stores, you know, we're going to want our retail, we're going to want our offices on as well in terms of searching for those particular types there as well. But let's take kind of the big supermarkets, the Lidls that we mentioned there. So I think kind of London-wise, they're kind of, I don't know, kind of slightly smaller. I think they're kind of 0.8, something like that. And I think you mentioned kind of they do go a little bit bigger there as well in terms of the sites they're looking for. So if we take that kind of requirement and pop it all in here, keep all those uses on as well, and then press search, and then we'll just see what it pulls back. Now, Adam mentioned as well that kind of, yes, they will kind of consider these as well. Of course, they will, certainly for the convenience side of things, but obviously they're also going to have a look kind of on these out of towns there as well. So we can always move our filters across and kind of see what's going on there as well. Now, this section is kind of semi-interesting actually, simply because I have just seen that there's an Aldi there as well. So there's several ways that you could use this. You could definitely use the company search again and plot where places like Aldi already exist, and this would come up and you can kind of see it surrounded there as well. Equally, there is a retail park there as well, and you see kind of the likes of Lidl and Aldi and things, you know, they do take those kind of spaces as well. So if you do hear of kind of places like in here near me in Stratford-upon-Avon, Halfords are kind of all gone and Lidl have completely moved into the retail parks. That is another source of opportunities as well, because they will kind of move into those spaces. So if you do come across these kind of big companies that used to exist in the retail parks or are no longer going to exist in the retail parks, someone like Lidl will move in there as well. Now, if I look at kind of, you know, this kind of area now, I know I kind of touched on the retail part, but you might be interested in something like this or these size requirements. This actually meets my requirements there as well. And we can suddenly start to click in and kind of see. Now, this one's probably a little bit more difficult because it's owned by Nestle, which they're probably going to develop it into something. But there's actually kind of this dwelling here, which again meets the requirements and could well be something of interest there as well. Now, just to show you something that I've not really touched on very much of is things like this planning overlay, because obviously it's a big part of this is that you're going to want to know kind of what they're up to there, what are they actually doing, is it already going to be developed out, have they tried in the past, anything like that as well. And we can do that for these surrounding kind of properties there as well, but you'll see a little planning marker on there as well, and we can kind of see, yeah, they've put a pond in, things like that, but nothing in kind of the way that would restrict anything in terms of going to have a look there as well. So it suddenly becomes a lot more interesting. Of course, we've got all that information there that we've previously had a look at. We can start to dig a bit deeper in Aldi and kind of see, download their lease, see kind of what terms they've got. We can actually export commercial comparable data as well. So we can take that out of the platform. We can kind of say, well, what leases have they, what's the most recent lease? Go and have a look and see what terms they've got on there as well. But of course, we'd just be forming our standard kind of due diligence, going through and kind of seeing if there are any sort of impacts that we need to be wary of in terms of this particular site. But actually, it doesn't look like there's a lot kind of holding this one back. Does it have all those other things that needs main road and things like, all the other requirements? Certainly looks that way. And obviously Aldi exists just around the corner there as well. So that's a way to kind of find the supermarkets there, combining different types of tools, looking at the planning in different kind of ways there as well. But it is all still using that kind of filtration system that Nimbus has as well. Just very, very quickly, just to give you an example, again, looking at the time, is that if we are looking for the convenience side of things, it's again using all of these elements here, but I would definitely kind of obviously squeeze down to kind of sites that they're actually after in terms of the sizes as well. And then sort of go, well, actually, probably more offices, retail, and then again, I'd combine it with things like availability as well. Start searching again. Whoops, somewhat out of town. Start searching again, and it will take us and give us those results on the map there as well. Yeah. And again, we can kind of start using things like availability, but you're showing those all up there again. So a big part of this is merely taking Adam's data and kind of what those guys do at the requirements list, and then feeding it into the filtration system, but then embedding that with all the tools that wrap around it, like land registry documents, lease, all those details, comparables, all at the edge of your fingertips, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that it's one of the features on Nimbus is, let's say, for example, you're sat in a certain part of the UK and you're aware of a company that might be going bust, and it's called Joe's Coaches, and they've got 6 stores across they've got six sites in the Northwest. You can do a search for Joe's Coaches Limited, and that'll bring up the 6 sites that Joe's Coaches Limited own. They might range from really small sites, but they might range from acre, 2 acres. So you also have that ability as well, just from, if you have a little bit of market intel, you know that an operator might be struggling, you can kind of just quickly see what else they own across the UK.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm just looking around here. So a bit like this one here. So you can either do that via the company search and do it that way, or if you do have that local knowledge, one's closing down, you drive past, you see it closing down, Nimbus it and have a look, and then use something like search company properties. But actually, you've got these 2 other buttons here that says, well, actually, have they instructed agents to sell their sites, or have they announced any closures as well? So you can actually, it does a quick Google search for you to see if they've announced any closures as well. So you're absolutely right. There's definitely another really good avenue for you there as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's an extra thing that's worth touching on is that, I guess, depending on who the audience is, they might be looking to secure sites and do the whole development process, but a lot of these active requirements will pay introductory fees as well. So if it's a case of you being aware of an opportunity that you might not feel personally you can develop out, then you can intro this to a retailer. So a Lidl or an Aldi might pay you 1% or 1.5% of the purchase price. A Domino's might pay you a one-off 10 grand fee if you find them a site and they go on to practical completion. And so it's worth.
I think it's worth saying that they are very honourable in terms of following that through. So we had last year a co-op introduced. We introduced the sites about 4 years ago, and then they honoured the £10,000 fee. I think last March or something like that, because they'd taken the sign. I think you talked about lists earlier. Obviously, we haven't really talked about it here, but obviously the workflow. So you can start to put the sites into your workflow. You can work on them. You can even put your historic stuff in there, and then at some stage something might happen to that site. These things take a long time. I think we've got a McDonald's and a co-op still. We've got a McDonald's that I think we were due a fee on about 6 years ago. So I guess at some point they will do it, but they are these retailers and occupiers are very honourable in terms of following through, even if it's 4 or 5 years later. They're on you are on their CRM system, and it's worth, even if you can't develop it yourself, is introducing it to them, because they will stick with that later on.
Yeah, good point. And there's often a question around, you often get asked, is how do you kind of protect your position if you're aware of something, whether it be a property or a site, and before you know it, you're introducing to people, and then there's that fear of, okay, now the whole market knows about it. So there's certain things you can do that kind of just ensuring that you kind of protect yourself as well. And I guess we can maybe go through that. That's probably for another day. But it's just worth noting that a lot of these occupiers will pay introductory fees, even if they've got a retained agent. So just worth noting that as well.
Cool. I shall stop sharing. There you go.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of people have asked about details for your website, Adam. So I'll put that on the chat, so they've just got access, because there are quite a few people say, how do I access the information around who's out there, you're looking for sites and stuff like that. I think I'll launch a poll here maybe as well, just see if anybody would like to, first of all, if they'd like to book there's a webinar. Joe, you do one tomorrow at 2 o'clock, are you? Sort of an introduction to Nimbus Maps.
Yeah, exactly. So where we'll go through
trial. So I just launched that poll, and if people would just like to say yes or no onto that, we can then follow that up if anyone wants sort of further details about that. And I'll add in your details, Adam, about, obviously, like I said, it's not just the 3 use cases that you've talked about here. It's obviously the significant wider requirements, and they're all kept fresh, they're kept live. You're constantly talking to the occupiers, their agents, to sort of see definitely who's in the marketplace and who's doing that. So I'll pop that into the chat here as well, which I should be able to do.
It just feels like certainly the last, obviously I think mid 2020, everyone had their kind of heads in the sand, the uncertainty of what COVID would bring. But what we're seeing is that definitely the last few months or so, it seems like operators are just being a little bit more active in terms of publishing their requirements, maybe looking to open more stores, Their requirements may have changed slightly, but yeah, it just feels like there's a little bit more, slight more confidence in the market, definitely the last couple of months. Definitely Q2 of this year. That's what we're seeing just through conversations we're having. And
at the outset, we're seeing a lot more activity from these companies as well, and it sort of really gives a lot of confidence that they're out. Maybe it's because it's 12 months they haven't done an awful lot, and then they've got a pent up demand, and things always change, aren't they? I mean, you sort of see Carluccio's are looking for delis, and they've, even though they had an issue last year, they're sort of reinventing themselves as a new sort of format, like that. So there changes. There's always a cycling through the marketplace of requirements and stuff. So
yeah, and I guess now is the time where there's potentially more opportunity available, depending on location as well. So if that's the case, there might be some better deals that could be done. Landlords that might be more flexible. So yeah, so touch wood, that continues, and we see a bit more activity in the market and a bit more confidence. That'd be great to see.
Okay, well, can I invite everybody to, if anybody's got any questions, we've got a few, just to sort of raise your hand, and I'll invite you in to ask you a question if I may, and then yeah, if you could make sure your microphone's off. So I've got Andrew Jones. If I just allow you to talk there, Andrew, if you unmute your microphone and ask your question, we'll hopefully be able to answer it for you. Andrew,
this is new, so you can bring a guest in.
Yeah.
Hi there. I think that was an accidental raise of my hand.
Okay. Okay. Fine. I'll mute you on that one, then. I'll ask Mark Deering if that's okay. Hi, Mark. You okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Mark. Yeah. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. That was really good. Thank you very much for that. I just had a question, and you may well cover it another time, but we're on about, obviously we're trying to find sites, and if you don't own the site, my sort of experience has always been you've got to somehow get an option. You've got to secure that before you start talking to people, because if you talk to them, there's every opportunity for them just to nick it from you, basically. So. Is this slightly different, do you think, in their attitudes, or is these people the same sort of way they work?
I think on the whole, they've got a job to do, which is to find those sites. And if they get a reputation in the marketplace, they're going to go and sort of do the dirty on people. I think it's gonna stick, isn't it? You say that, Adam, and I think that the thing is, if you can sometimes be, I've got a site in Bury St Edmunds. Are you looking anywhere around there? You can sort of eke that out of them first time round, and then if they're not, you can then introduce it to them. And most of them, you go on their CRM system, that site is by and large locked against you as an individual. Would you agree, Adam?
Yeah. Mark, are you looking to intro sites and take an intro fee? Are you looking to find a site, build it out? What's your
Well, I do either, but I mean, as an intro point of view, I was more looking at that and thinking, well, if I found something that somebody owned, and I was to write, let's say, to Aldi and say, look, we've got, I've got a site. How in depth do you go? Do you just sort of look at their requirements and say, I've got a site that is X, Y, Z square meters on a main road, all that, is it of interest to you? Is that the sort of first commitment to them? And then if they say yes, do you then follow up with this is the actual site?
Yeah, I would, what I've done in the past, I would just kind of pick up the phone. Let's say it's Joe Smith that covers the Southwest, and the site you're looking at is in Bristol. I would pick up the phone to Joe and just say, hi Joe, do you still have an active requirement for South Bristol? If he confirms that yes we do, then you can just send over an email with maybe a kind of I probably would, I guess it really depends on the relationship you've already built with that acquisition manager. But if it's a national operator such as the Lidls and Aldis, they will kind of guess, they will be honest and say, we're actually already aware of that. The likelihood is they may or may not, they may be, we're already aware of that. Thank you anyway, Mark. But so yeah, I would email them and say, hi Joe, here's the site we discussed, site plan, bit of an overview as we discussed in the presentation. Is this of interest? Can you confirm my introduction? ? Then you're asking Aldi specifically, can you confirm that you've accepted my introduction? So you have that kind of in writing, and then they'll come back and say, yeah, we're not actually aware of this site. Thank you for forwarding it on to us. And it really depends on, I guess, the likes of Aldi and Lidl get sent a lot of stuff, and it depends on who's sending it to them. They might ask you to act on their behalf. So can you act on our behalf and speak to the landowner and try and secure something? typically they might bring that in-house and do that themselves, and they might just say thank you for your intro, that's been logged, etc., etc. So I guess it depends on the relationship you've already built with that occupier, and but yeah, pick up the phone, get something in writing, and just ask the question: Can you confirm this introduction? Question mark.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for your question, Mark. Let's ask Al S. I don't. If you want to, Al, do you want to ask your question? If you can unmute.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Al.
great. Thanks very much. A really useful session. So, thank you for that. Great to hear the previous question there about what how you go about making an introduction for a site to a retailer. But what's one of the key things that you would say that you need to do? You talked about how to protect your position, and you've talked that there is trust, and usually these retailers do honour introductions, and if you've got something committed in writing. But apart from that, what would be a really good way to protect yourself? And I think the previous question did ask about whether you have to get an options contract or not, or an options deal before you actually open the discussion with the retailer. Is that the best way to protect yourself with an option contract? Is there something else that you do?
Well, you can. I mean, you could obviously go and talk to the owner of the property as well, couldn't you? And not be specific about the end user. And so I've looked at your property. I think I could do something with it. Would you happily have a conversation with me? And that's so you can act obviously on the occupier's side, or you can act on the owner's side, isn't it, really? And you can obviously have a conversation to start with to determine which one you think you're most likely to secure as the client, maybe, and then you back that horse, but don't give them it's all about not giving them too much information and getting yourself I suppose a position with it, isn't it, and trying to get that in writing, exchange of emails or something, as strong as you possibly can. Options are quite tough, aren't they, Adam, to sort of get, because it's quite a financial and legal commitment on the site at an early stage. I think it's just about a matter of trying to, talk to both parties loosely and then see which one is most likely to do something with you. I think that. Adam?
Yeah, it's kind of like chicken and egg, isn't it? You don't want to spend time speaking to the landowner if in the end a Co-op or a Tesco Express were never interested anyway. So I guess you could, let's say that the property you're looking at you might have Co-op in mind. You could contact Co-op and say, hi Co-op, just to confirm, do you still have a requirement for High Street in Swansea? Just be very generic, and they'll come back and say, yeah, we're still actively looking for something there. What do you have in mind? So then you know that, okay, Co-op still have an active requirement for High Street Swansea. You could then maybe get in touch with the property owner that you're of the specific property and just kind of maybe get a feel for whether they would sell. And going down the option route, probably not. I guess it'd probably be maybe Simon that might be slightly more helpful in terms of how best to play it in that route. You could look at options. You could, I guess, from my point of view, it's the relationship you've already built with that retailer. Maybe I'll come back to you and maybe a bit slightly clearer in terms of what I would do in that case, in that kind of step by step. I don't want to kind of just riff off some thoughts and give you the wrong thing. So maybe I'll get your email and come back with step by step in terms of what I do. Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, that's useful. Thank you.
It does depend very much on the occupier, the landowner, and how are the individuals? Are they more sophisticated? They are a national. They are a pension fund and stuff like that. So I think each case is almost slightly different depending on who you're talking to and what they're like, really. But I said most of the national occupiers, they certainly do not want to get a reputation of doing something with you and then cutting you out the loop and doing something over there. They'd rather pay 2 lots of fees, to be perfectly honest, and secure the site, because 10, 15 grand for an agent's fee is neither here nor there if you're talking £1 million plus development or refurbishment and a fit out and stuff. So the last thing they want to do is get a reputation for doing this. But I suppose it comes, Adam, isn't it, sort of talking to them and getting a feel, and then maybe ideally meeting with them at some point and getting a true feel of what they're going to be going to be like, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. It's not, I mean, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And it's tough to piece together a deal like this, where you're kind of getting a co-op on agreement for lease and you've secured a property which you don't own on an option, and you're piecing that together. And how do you make the property owner aware that co-op aren't interested? Because if they are aware, then why wouldn't they do it directly? It's tough. It's a tough deal to piece together. I mean, they are possible, but yeah, you have to, you have to certainly make sure you're protected. And there are ways of doing it, whether it be an option or just the relationship you've built with maybe a co-op. But yeah, it's tough, and they are difficult to piece together. Hence why everyone's not doing them, I suppose.
Sorry, is that helpful in any way at all? Or?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got Halif. I'll just ask you to come in and ask your question, if that's okay. Are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah. Hi. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Great presentation. Quite new, insightful information. Didn't realize this. As a property investor, Adam, this is a question for you. What opportunities are there for someone like, if you're looking at, or what difficulties you might face as a property investor if this was a strategy you were trying?
Which strategy was that? Sorry.
You know, like for example, you said instead of like, they're obviously you're saying be an introduction.
Yeah.
One of my questions was obviously, I think Simon answered that. I was saying, what do these companies prefer, leasehold or freehold? And I think he answered saying that they would either's option. But my question is, say for example, if you were to buy these properties, like land yourself, and you actually ended up giving us a leasehold to these companies, because again, you're leasing these guys for long term anyway, so that's good investment. But what kind of difficulties you might find in that strategy?
I guess the initial difficulty that springs to mind is actually securing these opportunities. So finding a site and then piecing it together, and then having a co-op or a blue chip tenant, your co-ops, your Domino's, your pizza on a lease. That you have the initial challenge of piecing these deals together. In my experience as an agent, these operators, especially the blue chip operators, have always been relatively good to deal with. So, and they all have kind of in-house teams, whether it be an in-house building surveyor, an in-house QS, an in-house architect, or even a planner. So they can, and sometimes, and Simon, you might agree, when you're doing these developments, they might bring some of that work in-house. So they might they'd rather do the fit out, they'd rather run the planning. So yeah, it definitely helps when you've built a good relationship with some of these occupiers, because they have a lot of the team in-house that will do a lot of the work. In terms of the lease, Simon, you could probably touch on it as well.
Are you saying you buy the site and then you do the deal with them, or you don't buy?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, for example, so yeah, that's what I'm asking. So, for example, you buy the land and then you lease it out to them.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, just basically, because I think once you're in control of the land and they need the site, you're pretty much in the box seat of determining what you want to do. I mean, some of them would prefer to buy, but they will still take a lease for you, and because you've got the site, if it's the only show in the road, they'll take a lease, they'll rent it off you, subject to how far I guess you can negotiate with them. That's when you sort of take the leasehold comps, like Joe was saying, you take a company search, you find the most recent leases, you see what the most recent Audi lease is, the most recent Domino's lease, and you get copies of them, and you say, well, it's 20,000 a year, well, more than that, probably 60 grand a year rent, and it's 1,800 square feet, it's X per square foot. And you use that, you can even get a copy of the lease and you know what their standard terms are. So you know what you're kind of signing up to. But if you're in control of the site, you can, by and large, dictate most of these terms. And you can weigh up, well, do I want 2 million for the land, or do I want to rent it for 350,000, but I've got to go and pay for a couple of million quid to do the development? It's a bit of a, you just do your appraisal and decide which one is your most attractive, I suppose. Does that answer?
No, I agree with that. But that's what I'm asking. The question was, Adam kind of answered that as well, that some of these companies will have everything in-house, meaning they will just do everything themselves. So you're just leasing the land out to them, and then they will just do their own development themselves. So you don't get involved with that, which means less cost for you as a landowner, basically.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was saying about the Cafe Nero deal, was basically Cafe Nero going out to fit out and spending, I don't know, 250 grand to fit it out as a Cafe Nero. And we said, look, stick another layer of boarding on the ceiling, stick a staircase in for us to release the upper floors and just board it out. And they said, yeah, we've got a team on site, we'll just give us 10 grand as a capital contribution, and all of a sudden you've released land and whatever it is, and they'll do all the work for you, and they'll get all the consents and do that, because they've got an in-house team there. It's all about doing things quickly, because they just want to get on and operate the site and start selling coffee or selling beans, tins of beans, or whatever it might be that their end use is. But
exactly, that's what I mean. It's more professional, and it's more, like you said, blue chip companies are more professional in that sense. You know, they will just either help you out, or they'll just, you know, and it's all in house, so it's less cost for you rather than running around for all this stuff. But yeah, that kind of that helps to answer.
Yeah, I mean, people like in the good old days, I think Tesco's did a huge number of capital contribution deals with the pub industry, didn't they? So they in effect did the conversion work as part of their fit out, and then you just throw them the money that's going to cost to turn it from a pub to a convenience store. And that was a nice, simple. They're on site anyway, aren't they? That's the attractive thing on it. So.
I've actually seen them as well, to be fair, that they've converted a lot of pubs, and they've actually like taken the land, and for them it's ideal parking space and a mini Tesco Express, so that worked well.
Yeah. It's glad to see them back on the acquisition trail, isn't it? I think so.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I answered your question. So,
yeah.
So I'm just conscious of time, guys. So I would suggest that perhaps we just wrap that up now, if that's okay. So is that okay? You guys got anything you'd like to say, Joe, on bits, or Adam? So I think what we'll do is we've just got to put the details in of. So obviously you can. Joe's got a webinar tomorrow at 2 o'clock, haven't you, Joe? Which is just going into a bit more detail on all of this sort of stuff here. So I'll just put that onto the chat again. We've also, you can sign up to a 14-day free trial, which you can, you know, use at your heart's content. Sign up today and perhaps hopefully see Joe tomorrow. And in the chat, I've also put Adam's requirements list. So obviously Adam's constantly keeping that up to date, whether you own the site or whether you're looking to find a site or whatever it is, you know, go on there, it's constantly being refreshed, and things are changing at a pace, aren't they, at the moment? So what, you know, new entrants, people coming off the list, you want to be talking to people who are genuinely active and stuff like that. So so I think with that, I will just add those two into the list for you, and then I think with that I would just say sorry, let me just get that in so everybody's got the details.
Yeah, I think, Simon, I think you included the link for the newsletter. So we send out a weekly newsletter of this week there were 10 new requirements which comprised of X, Y, Z, so it gives you a bit of an idea each week as to who's doing what and who's looking,
which is great. Okay, perfect. So we will send everybody a copy of the video, and there's two links there. One is to sign up to Nimbus Maps, one is to be able to come on to Joe's webinar tomorrow where you can go into more detail. If you want to throw some sites at Joe, he'll do some work on it and find them for you. But yeah, so finally, thanks very much, Adam, for being our guest speaker today to talk about the requirements list. And,
thanks for having me.
Thank you, Joe. And I've been Simon Davis. We've been Nimbus Maps, and we look forward to helping you on your property investment and development journey. Cheers.
Great. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Good job.